Some mistakes ruin your life, others rewrite it completely. This story came to me from Seoul, from a waitress who worked in one of Gangnam's most expensive restaurants. She told me she almost didn't survive the night, but she also told me something else. The worst decision she ever made became the only reason she's still alive. On an ordinary night filled with strangers and expensive lies, a tired waitress named Mina made a decision she couldn't take back. She didn't know his name. She didn't recognize the silent fear that followed him into the room. All she knew was that a man crossed a line, and before fear could stop her, she slapped him. The sound froze an entire restaurant. The man she struck wasn't just wealthy. He was Kang Dae-hyun, the most feared Mafia boss in Seoul, a man whose enemies vanished without explanations and whose anger was said to end bloodlines. Everyone expected violence. Everyone waited for her scream. Instead, he smiled. And that smile became the beginning of something far more dangerous than revenge. This story isn't just about power or romance. It's about two people standing on opposite sides of survival. And the moment fate forced their worlds to collide. Stay with me until the end. The real shock wasn't the slap. It was what he decided to do afterward. Mina learned early that invisibility could be protection. Growing up far from home, in a city that never slowed down for anyone struggling to keep up, she discovered people rarely noticed waitresses unless something went wrong. Plates arrived, no thanks. Drinks refilled, no eye contact. Mistakes, however, were unforgettable. Tonight had already been long before the doors even opened. Her feet ached. Rent was overdue. Her phone carried 3 missed calls from a number she avoided calling back. Life felt like a tightrope, stretched thinner every day. The restaurant sparkled with artificial elegance, warm lighting, polished marble, conversations spoken softly, so wealth wouldn't need to announce itself loudly. She tied her apron tighter and reminded herself of one rule. Get through the shift. Go home. Repeat tomorrow. Then the atmosphere changed. It wasn't obvious at first. No dramatic entrance, no shouting, just a subtle shift. Conversations lowering, staff straightening unconsciously, the manager appearing near the entrance faster than usual. She glanced up. Kang Dae-hyun walked in wearing a black suit so simple it became intimidating. He moved without hurry, yet everyone adjusted around him instinctively, like water parting around stone. She assumed he was another rich customer. Nothing more. She picked up a tray and approached his table when assigned. Up close, he seemed calm, observant, his expression unreadable, eyes sharp enough to feel like questions. "Good evening," she said. He nodded once. No smile, no arrogance, just presence. She turned to leave when chaos intervened. A drunk guest staggered backward, laughing loudly at something no one else found amusing. His elbow struck her tray. Glasses tipped. Red wine spilled forward, across Kang's suit. Time slowed. The drunk man immediately pointed at her. She did it. The accusation hit harder than the accident. Humiliation burned her chest. Weeks of exhaustion, disrespect, swallowed anger, all compressed into one unbearable moment. The drunk man grabbed her wrist roughly. "Watch what you're doing." Something inside Mina snapped. Her hand moved before fear could stop it. The slap echoed, and instantly the entire restaurant fell silent. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. Then realization arrived. She had just struck Kang Dae-hyun, one of the most powerful and dangerous men in Seoul. Slowly, he turned his face back toward her. No anger, no shock, only interest, And that was infinitely worse, because powerful men didn't react unpredictably. They calculated, and whatever he was calculating now involved her. No one moved. Even the music seemed to fade into embarrassment, as though the room itself understood something irreversible had just happened. Her hand still tingled. She expected shouting, security rushing forward, pain. Instead, Kang adjusted his sleeve slowly, examining the dark stain spreading across his suit like it mildly inconvenienced him rather than insulted him. The drunk customer released her wrist immediately, suddenly sober under the weight of attention. I didn't mean," the man stammered. Kang ignored him completely. His gaze remained fixed on Mina, calm, steady, curious. It was the curiosity that frightened her most. He stood. Chairs scraped quietly as nearby diners instinctively leaned away, creating distance without being told. Fear traveled through the room faster than sound. She swallowed hard. Now it comes, she thought. But his voice, when it arrived, was soft. What is your name? The question disoriented her. Not, why did you hit me? Not, do you know who I am? Just her name. She hesitated. Every survival instinct told her silence might be safer. Around them, staff members looked horrified, silently begging her to answer. He waited, patiently. The patience felt deliberate, like he already knew she would eventually comply. She finally spoke, barely above a whisper. Mina. He repeated it once, testing the sound as if committing it to memory. Then something impossible happened. He smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, but genuinely amused. Bring me another drink, he said, and sat back down. The room exhaled collectively. The manager nearly collapsed with relief. Mina walked away on shaking legs, confused beyond reason. Punishment would have made sense. Anger would have been logical. But mercy felt like a trap she didn't understand yet. As she returned with the drink, she noticed something unsettling. He wasn't looking at the wine. He was watching her, studying her the way people study puzzles they intend to solve. In that moment, Mina unknowingly became the most interesting problem in a dangerous man's life. If this story has you hooked so far, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Mina's position? She hoped it was over. One strange night, one strange customer, a story she could forget. But the next evening, he returned. Same table, same quiet authority. The staff noticed immediately. Whispers followed her through the kitchen. You know who that is? One co-worker asked nervously. She shook her head. Kang Dae-hyun. He runs half this city. Rumors filled the gaps quickly. Organized crime, political influence, enemies who disappeared quietly. Stories layered over truth until she didn't know what was real anymore. All she knew was that fear surrounded his name. Yet when she approached his table again, he behaved like an ordinary guest. Almost. You look less angry today, he remarked casually. She blinked. I wasn't angry. He raised an eyebrow slightly. No? The corner of her mouth twitched despite herself. Their conversations grew longer each visit, small questions at first. Where she was from, why she worked nights, what she wanted beyond survival. No one had asked her those things in years. He listened carefully, never interrupting. His voice remained low and measured, rarely rising above the ambient hum of the restaurant. When he spoke, it was with the economy of someone who had never needed to repeat himself. And slowly, against her better judgment, Mina stopped feeling afraid during those conversations. That frightened her more than anything else, because fear created boundaries, Comfort erased them. "One evening," he said quietly, "you are the only person here who speaks to me normally." She shrugged. "Maybe everyone else tries too hard." A rare laugh escaped him, genuine, unguarded. It was a warmer sound than she expected, less controlled than his usual speech. Across the room, several diners stared in shock. Apparently, laughter from Kang Dae-hyun was rare, dangerously rare. She realized too late that attention had shifted toward them, eyes watching, calculating, judging. And among those watching, a man named Park Sung-ho stepped outside, already dialing a phone. News of the Mafia boss's growing interest had just reached someone who wanted to hurt him, and Mina was about to become the easiest weapon. The night air felt colder than usual when her shift ended. She wrapped her jacket tighter and began the familiar walk toward the bus stop. Halfway there, a woman stepped out from the shadows. Elegant, composed, nervous. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had learned things the hard way. "You need to stay away from him," the stranger said immediately. No greeting, no explanation. Confusion tightened Mina's chest. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." The woman's voice softened. "My name is Soo-jin. I was in your position 3 years ago." Mina stared at her. "What do you mean?" Soo-jin pulled back her sleeve, revealing a faded scar running across her knuckles. "I worked at a different restaurant. He came in. He noticed me. And for a while, I thought I was special. What happened? I left before it destroyed me." She let her sleeve fall. "He destroys everything near him, not because he wants to, but because of who he is. The enemies, the power, the alliances, anyone he cares about becomes a target." Mina learned pieces of truth that night, standing in the cold while cars rushed past on the boulevard. Rival organizations, silent wars fought behind luxury building facades, power balanced on fragile alliances, and anyone emotionally close to Kang Dae-hyun eventually became leverage. "You think he's interested in you," Soo-jin said gently. "That makes you vulnerable. I stayed too long. I have the scars to prove it. Don't make the same mistake." Fear returned, heavier this time because it carried understanding. Maybe quitting was the smartest decision. Maybe distance was survival. Mina decided then she would resign tomorrow. End it before things became complicated, before curiosity turned into something irreversible. But as she turned the corner toward her apartment building, a familiar black car waited. Kang stood beside it, as though he already knew her decision. "I wondered how long it would take," he said calmly. Her stomach dropped. "How did you—" "I notice when important things try to leave." His words felt too personal, too accurate. She opened her mouth to respond. Headlights suddenly surged toward them at terrifying speed. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And comment below. Do you think she should have left when she had the chance? The headlights came fast. Too fast. For a fraction of a second, Mina froze, her brain refusing to understand what her eyes were seeing. The car wasn't slowing down. It wasn't turning. It was aiming. Before fear could fully register, Kang's hand grabbed her arm. Hard. He pulled her backward just as the vehicle swerved onto the sidewalk. Tires screamed against concrete. The world exploded into motion. Glass shattered. Gunshots cracked through the night. The sound didn't feel real. Sharp bursts tearing through the air like reality itself splitting open. He pushed her behind the car door, his body shielding hers completely. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice calm in a way that made the chaos more terrifying. More shots rang out. Metal sparked inches away. Her hands trembled violently as she crouched beside him, heart pounding so loudly she couldn't hear her own thoughts. This wasn't rumor anymore. This wasn't whispered danger inside restaurants. This was his world, and she was standing inside it. Within seconds, another vehicle arrived. Men stepped out, controlled, efficient, already returning fire. The attacker's car sped away into traffic, disappearing as suddenly as it appeared. Silence followed, heavy, unnatural. Her ears rang as adrenaline slowly drained away. He turned toward her immediately. "Are you hurt?" Not anger, not orders, concern. She shook her head, barely breathing. Only then did he relax slightly, tension leaving his shoulders. That realization unsettled her deeply. In the middle of an ambush, his first priority had been her. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. He stood and offered his hand. "You can't go home tonight," he said gently. The statement wasn't a suggestion. It was fact. Fear surged again. "I don't want to be involved in this." His expression darkened, not with irritation, but regret. "You already are." And she knew he was right, because whoever attacked him now knew her face. Somewhere across the city, the people who ordered the attack were already preparing their next move, this time targeting her directly. The residence didn't look like what she expected. No flashing guards, no obvious fortress, just a quiet, modern house hidden behind tall walls and silence. Inside, everything felt controlled, minimal, precise, safe, but not free. "You'll stay here temporarily," he explained, "until things settle." Temporary sounded comforting, but she sensed nothing in his life was ever temporary. Days passed differently there. No shouting, no violence, only long stretches of quiet interrupted by phone calls spoken in low voices behind closed doors. She began seeing another side of him, not the feared figure from rumors. A man who drank coffee slowly in the mornings. A man who read reports late into the night, exhaustion visible when he thought no one noticed. One evening, she asked, "Do you ever rest?" He considered the question seriously. Rest requires trust. She wanted to ask why, but the way he stood, like a man who had learned early that trust was a currency he couldn't afford, made the question feel cruel. "And you don't trust anyone?" A pause. Very few. Something unspoken passed between them. Understanding. Loneliness. Recognizing loneliness. They shared meals occasionally, conversations growing easier. He asked about her childhood in Busan, her dreams before survival replaced ambition. She told him about wanting to study design, about the scholarship she couldn't afford, about the version of herself that existed before rent payments and missed calls from her mother. He listened more than he spoke, as if collecting fragments of a normal life he could never live himself. And slowly, dangerously, she stopped seeing him as a monster. That frightened her most, because humanizing danger made leaving harder. One night, during a quiet conversation, he said unexpectedly, "You changed the atmosphere around me." She frowned. "How?" "People speak honestly when you're present. Even my own men. They don't perform when you're in the room." She laughed softly. "Maybe they're just less scared." He watched her carefully. "Are you?" She hesitated. "I should be." Their eyes held longer than before, the space between them shrinking without permission. His hand moved slightly across the table, almost touching hers. Almost. A phone rang sharply, breaking the moment. He answered. His expression changed instantly. Cold, focused, dangerous. After ending the call, he stood. "We have a problem." The attack hadn't come from an enemy outside. It came from someone inside his own organization. Trust, she learned, was the rarest currency in his world, and someone had just spent it against him. Park Sung-ho, one of his closest lieutenants, a man who had worked beside him for nearly a decade, had leaked information about his movements, including her location. The realization hit Kang quietly. No shouting, no visible rage, just silence so heavy it made breathing difficult. "How long?" he asked one of his men. "Months. He's been feeding information to the Busan faction. They promised him territory." The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was patient, planned. Park Sung-ho hadn't acted out of fear or impulse. He had calculated, and in his calculation, Mina was acceptable collateral. She watched the transformation happen in real time, warmth disappearing behind calculation. The gentle man she'd begun to know replaced by the leader everyone feared. "This is because of me," she whispered. He turned sharply. "No, Park made his choice long before you appeared. You were simply convenient for them." But neither of them fully believed that, because enemies attack weaknesses, and she had become one. Security tightened overnight, guards doubled, phones monitored. She felt like a storm followed her existence. "I should leave," she said finally. His response came immediately. "No." The word carried more emotion than authority. Silence followed, neither willing to admit what was forming between them, because naming it would make it real, and real things could be taken away. Outside, preparations for retaliation began quietly. Inside, tension grew heavier. The house no longer felt quiet. It felt like the calm before something irreversible. Phones rang constantly. Men moved through hallways with controlled urgency. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Even the air carried tension, like a storm waiting to break. She began understanding something terrifying. This wasn't retaliation anymore. It was war. Late one night, she found him standing alone on the balcony overlooking the city. Lights stretched endlessly below them, beautiful and indifferent to violence unfolding in hidden corners. "You haven't slept," she said softly. He didn't turn. "Sleep requires certainty." "And you don't have that?" A faint shake of his head. They crossed a line. His voice wasn't angry. It was colder than anger, resolved. She stepped closer. "People are going to get hurt. They already have." The words lingered between them. She realized then that his world ran on rules different from hers. Mercy invited weakness. Weakness invited destruction. But watching him prepare for violence hurt more than she expected. "You're changing," she whispered. He finally looked at her. "No, you are simply seeing me clearly now." The honesty stung, because part of her knew he had never hidden who he was. She just wanted him to be someone else. A gulf opened between them that night, not physical, but emotional. Two realities pulling in opposite directions. Hours later, news arrived. Park Sung-ho had moved openly against him, aligning with rival forces from Busan. Several safe locations were compromised, including one Mina had stayed in earlier. Her chest tightened. "They're doing this because of me." He stepped closer immediately. "They're doing this because they fear losing. There's a difference." But she understood the truth. She wasn't just collateral anymore. She was leverage, and leverage always broke first. That night, while everyone focused on preparing for battle, she made a decision that would shatter both of their worlds. She thought of Soo Jin's scar. She thought of the warning she had been given. She wouldn't make the same mistake. She left before sunrise. No goodbye, no confrontation, Just a handwritten note placed carefully on the kitchen table. "Thank you for protecting me, but I refuse to be the reason you destroy yourself." Her hands trembled as she walked away from the only place that had felt safe in months. Every step hurt, but staying felt more dangerous than leaving, because love, she realized, could become another weapon enemies used. Across the city, Kang returned hours later. The moment he saw the empty room, he knew. He didn't shout, didn't break anything. He simply stood still, reading the note once, then again. For the first time in years, uncertainty crossed his face. His men waited for orders. None came. Because this wasn't a problem power could solve. He searched anyway, quietly, carefully. But Mina had disappeared back into anonymity, the same invisibility that once protected her. She left her job, moved to a small studio across the river in Mapo-gu, and became exactly what she had been before. A girl who knew how not to be seen. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The war ended swiftly afterward. Kang handled Park Sung-ho himself. Mina never asked how. She didn't need to. Rival factions were reminded why his name carried weight. His enemies underestimated how dangerous a man could become when he had nothing left to lose. Victory came. Peace followed. But victory felt hollow, because the one person who treated him like a human being was gone. And for the first time, the most feared man in Seoul understood loneliness. Until fate, stubborn and unpredictable, decided their story wasn't finished yet. Months later, their worlds collided again, not through violence, not through power, but coincidence. Mina worked in a small cafe across the river now, quieter, simpler, safer. Life had returned to routine, though something inside her always felt unfinished. Sometimes, late at night, she caught herself thinking about the way he listened, the way his voice dropped when he asked about her childhood, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room who wasn't performing. The bell above the cafe door rang. She looked up automatically and froze. Kang stood there. No guards, no intimidation. Just a man in a dark coat, slightly more tired than she remembered, his eyes finding hers across the small space with an expression that looked strangely like relief. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, he said softly, "You disappeared well." She swallowed. "I had practice being invisible." A faint smile appeared, familiar, restrained. They sat across from each other at a small table by the window, like strangers pretending not to share history. "I ended it," he said eventually. "The war." "I heard." Silence followed. Then he added quietly, "I learned something after you left." She waited. Power means nothing if there is no one left you want to share peace with. Emotion tightened her chest. He didn't ask her to return, didn't demand anything. For the first time since they met, he gave her complete choice, and that changed everything. She reached across the table slowly. This time, their hands touched, not by accident, not by impulse, but by decision. Outside, the city continued moving, unaware that two lives had just shifted again. His fingers closed around hers, careful, as if she might disappear. "Your coffee is getting cold," she said quietly. He smiled. "I don't mind." She didn't pull away. Tell me in the comments, was the slap a mistake or destiny? Because sometimes the most dangerous love stories are only the beginning.
I never thought it would end like this.
Some things are beyond our control,
Will I see you again?
if fate allows it.